Welcome to the Beeline VMS review of the Creating a Competitive Bid video. In this video we will walk through the process of creating a competitive bid. We begin by clicking New from the header bar. The first step of creating a competitive bid is selecting a competitive bid template. In the competitive bid field we can enter a keyword or template name, or we can click the drop-down arrow to see all of the available templates. Once our selection is made, we are brought to a welcome page where we can find a description of the template we have chosen. In this example, this template includes time and materials, milestones, unit of measure, and non-billable resources. Let's start creating a competitive bid. At the top, we have a ribbon bar that allows us to easily navigate through the workflow of the competitive bid. Individual tabs have sections that also can be easily navigated as we fill out the necessary information. Workflows are client-defined. Let's begin filling out the information under the General Information tab. We add the name for the competitive bid. Then enter a business justification. Moving down, we find additional fields. These fields can be defaulted based on the template, as we see in this example. The owner is defaulted with the person's name who is entering the competitive bid. The client admin can be someone who is entering the competitive bid on a manager's behalf. Or it can be someone who needs to be included. If we have a MSP or VMO that needs to be involved, we have that option as well. Administrative items, such as location, tax job category, and cost centers can also be defaulted, as well as any attachments that we want included. If we know that we need financials spread out over multiple cost centers, we can add that information by selecting the Add Cost Allocation Units. Currently, the estimated start date and end date fields are defaulted. However, we can easily change the dates as needed. The same is also true for the budget. Let's move back up to our ribbon bar and select the Contributors tab. Under the Contributors tab, we can view all the contributors for our competitive bid. Contributors are identified as anyone that may need to have access to the competitive bid, including the client admin and MSP we saw on General Information. An additional role now visible is the Viewer role. The Viewer role provides users access to the competitive bid, however they are unable to make any changes or contributions to the bid. Let's continue through the process by clicking the Approvers tab. From here, we want to submit this competitive bid for initial approval. This example is set up with the self-directed approval, which allows the manager to have the ability to add or remove approvers. Approval workflows can also be set up based on budget thresholds and are client-defined. Approval hierarchies can also be an interface touchpoint to your HRIS or ERP system. Once we click Submit, the competitive bid routes to the appropriate approvers. These approvers receive an email notification as well as a task item on their dashboard to let them know they have a competitive bid waiting for their approval. Once the competitive bid is approved, we can continue through the workflow, beginning with Events. The Events tab is where we set the parameters for vendor responses to a competitive bid. We can set the time zone that works best for us. Next, we select a bid deadline date and a bid deadline time. Additionally, we have the ability to include a question and answer forum for the vendors. This allows vendors to enter questions and receive answers directly in Beeline as they consider making a bid. Each time a question is entered, the manager receives an email notification and/or task item on their dashboard, alerting the manager that a question has been asked. To help manage this forum, we can designate a specific time frame for the question and answer period, by using the open and close date and time fields. Now let's return to the ribbon bar and select Details. Under the Details tab, we see additional defaulted information. The defaulted information is part of the template we chose for this competitive bid. This allows us to have standard information defaulted so that our managers don't have to come in and add the same information each time they create a competitive bid. However, even with standard information, there will be times when we need to make changes. We can make changes to any section that has a pencil icon. This icon only displays if a user's role allows editing. Now let's move on to the Assessment Builder. The Assessment Builder is a series of questions that are chosen to evaluate your vendors. These questions are sent over to the vendors as part of the vendor bidding process. Moving down, we see defaulted questions based on our template. We have the option to add additional questions by using the Add Question drop-down. We have several question options which include multiple choice, drop-down, yes/no questions, just to name a few. We have the option to make any of the defaulted questions or any questions we add required, allow comments, use them as knockout question or allow the vendor to include an attachment. Knockout questions are meant to filter out vendors based on their responses or their lack of response. Vendors are automatically disqualified from being considered for the bid if the answer does not fit our requirements. To make any changes to a question, we click the pencil icon to open editing. For example, let's make this a knockout question by selecting knockout. We can also change any of the other items or edit the actual question. Let's continue by clicking Save. The next tab is Financials. When starting this competitive bid, we chose a template that included milestones, unit of measure, roles, and non-billable resources. If we had chosen a different template, such as a milestone-only template, then we would only see a section for milestones. Currently, we are entering the financials from the manager perspective. However, if financials are unknown at the time the competitive bid is created, it can be sent to the vendors without the financial information. Then when bidding on the project, the vendors will input the financial information themselves. Let's begin entering the financial information, starting with the deliverables section, by selecting Add Milestone. From the Add Milestone dialog box, we fill in all of our milestone information, starting with the title and the type. Moving down, we select how often our milestone should occur. Let's make it recurring. And set a gross amount per milestone. Then set a start date. And how often we want the milestone to occur. We can also add cost allocations or add attachments for our milestones. Our last item is to add acceptance criteria for the milestones. Our final step is to save our milestone information. Upon saving the milestone information we just entered, Beeline has automatically created a schedule that includes a start and end date for each recurring milestone. Our next section is the unit of measure. A unit of measure is a non-deliverable item, meaning it doesn't have dates or resources tied to it and has a fixed fee. A sample unit of measure is an equipment rental. Let's add a unit of measure by clicking Add Unit of Measure and filling out the necessary information starting with the title and type. Next we add the quantity of the equipment rentals with a fixed fee of $250. As with adding milestones, we also have the ability to add relevant attachments and acceptance criteria to our unit of measure. Lastly, we save the information we entered. The next section of the financials is the roles. We can add multiple roles at one time by entering the quantity we need. We can leave the dates fields blank if we want the roles to begin and end as the same time as the project start and end date. If we know that our roles are needed for a specific time within the project, then we specify a start date and an end date. Next we add the number of hours we expect our roles will work and at what rate. We can change the rate or keep the provided rate. Next we save the information we just added. and B-line will populate the number of roles we added as individual lines. This allows us to edit individual roles if needed. Lastly, we can add any non-billable resources which allow us to track the on- and off-boarding of these resources. Typically, we see the need for more than one non-billable resource. We can enter the quantity we need and add the start date and an end date for tracking purposes. Next we save the information we just added. Once again B-line populates the information individually to make editing and tracking individual resources easy. The last section under our Financial tab is the summary. The summary allows us to see a compilation of all the financials we just added, in a quick snapshot. Next, we want to select the Invite Vendors tab, where we can select the vendors we want to receive the competitive bid. To help us decide which vendors to choose, we are provided with a list of recommended vendors with details, such as number of projects completed, number of milestones, and positive and negative feedback numbers. To select a vendor, we click in the Add Vendor field. We can enter a name to search or we can choose from the items in our drop-down list. Once we select a vendor, we want to select a contact for that vendor. This field will automatically pull in contacts related specifically to the vendor selected. The contact selected is the person responsible for this competitive bid and is the one who will be responding to the competitive bid on behalf of their agency. Let's select a couple more vendors. We have completed creating a competitive bid, so we are ready to go the last step in the process by clicking the checkmark box. From here we submit our competitive bid for approval. We have an additional approval step showing here where we can add additional approvers for the final approval of our competitive bid. Once a competitive bid goes through final approvals, the vendor's contacts receive an email notification and/or a task on their homepage to let them know they have a bid waiting for their review. At that time they can choose to submit a bid or decide they are not interested. Let's return to the home page by clicking the logo in the top left corner of the header bar. Thank you for viewing the Creating a Competitive Bid video.